Well, this fight is breaking out all over online since Tucker has had Nick Fuentes on his show. And Ben and Tucker Carlson are perhaps the spearheads of defining what conservatism is moving forward. Is the tent so big that we're going to make room for circus clowns?
Hey, kids, it's me!
If we're not creating a movement where the ideas of Nick Fuentes are not only idiotic but abhorrent, then I don't want anything to do with it. And I believe we need to have a sort of reckoning on the conservative right, because if we don't have principle, then we don't actually have a movement that we're fighting for. Origen was a brilliant man who combined philosophy and theology in ways that were truly fundamental that helped forward the Christian movement. And he was a bright star in the history of the early church. Only he dabbled probably a little bit too much in the former and not the latter, in philosophy and not theology. And he started to come up with some, let's just call it creative interpretations. He believed that all souls had a pre-incarnate existence before they were born. He believed in an allegorical interpretation that took things to the extreme, where he didn't even believe in a literal bodily resurrection. And perhaps his most controversial view is he was a universalist. He believed in something called apokatastasis, which essentially, I guess you would paraphrase it this way. He believed that God was so benevolent and loving that even he would save the devil, and that the devil wouldn't have to endure the fires of hell. So as you can see, because Origen played around on the edges and on the fringes of theology, he started to go outside of it and had to be condemned. The reason I bring this up is that I believe that the church has historically done a relatively good job of defining what it means to be a Christian, what orthodoxy actually is. Now, modern-day progressive interpretations of Christianity aside,
God is a lesbian.
We can look in the past and we can look and see how the past has been brought into the present to see what it has meant to be a Christian, past and present, so that we can continue this tradition on into the future. And it really isn't hard. And the church has done a relatively good job of making those lines very defined. Now, Spanish Inquisition aside, I understand, maybe not the best look for Christians, but we've done a relatively good job of rhetorically fighting for what it actually means to be a Christian. And I believe we need to have a sort of reckoning on the conservative right in the same manner. We need to truly define what it means to be a conservative. Is the tent so big that we're going to make room for circus clowns and we finally find that we are a circus? Or do we need to define these lines in a much better fashion so that we can actually understand what it is that we're fighting for? Well, this fight is breaking out all over online, especially right now, since Tucker has had Nick Fuentes on his show. And Ben and Tucker Carlson are perhaps the spearheads of defining what conservatism is moving forward. Now, this was on display just this past week as Megyn Kelly had both Ben and Tucker at separate times discussing this issue. If I were to trace this issue back a little bit, I'd say it really starts to kind of boil over with Israel going to war with Hamas, but then it also gets a little bit more considerably important as Charlie Kirk is assassinated, and now there are people cynically fighting for his followers. And we see now that Candace Owens, in the aftermath of Charlie, now has the #1 podcast in the world, according to Podscribe. And for whatever it's worth, she has the #14 podcast on Spotify. According to Podscribe, she's even more popular than Joe Rogan. All of this is happening right now at a very interesting time. Ben is fighting for a version of conservatism. Tucker is doing the same. And I think in their combined interviews, we can get an understanding of what the conservative movement is supposed to be about and how we should draw these lines in a way that truly makes sense so that we can understand what we're fighting for. Because I believe the future of the country truly depends upon it. And quite frankly, if the future of the country depends upon it, then the well-being of your kids, my kids, and their kids also depends upon it. So it's important for us to truly understand what the conservative movement is supposed to be all about. So we'll get that by virtue of the interview that Megyn Kelly had, first starting with Tucker.
And so I don't want to have a war with Ben Shapiro. I don't know does he really think that me doing an interview in which I explained that anti-Semitism is wrong to one of the lead purveyors of anti-Semitism, that somehow makes me a Nazi? Like, what is the argument here?
I'm going to ask him tomorrow night.
No, but I don't even understand what the argument is. All I know is that the right, and I've been on the right since before Ben was born, is acting like the left in such an amazingly precise way that I'm like, what the hell is going on? Mm-hmm. And I tell you this, I'm against that. I was against it when the left did it. I'm against censorship. I'm against identity politics, no matter who does it. period, because that violates my principles, and I'll never be on board with that. I don't care if my own kids run for office. If they engage in censorship and identity politics, I'm out. If it's all about their tribe, if this is about whose ever tribe, we're done. This has to be about our common Americanness. We're all American citizens, and if our politics is not about that, it can't continue.
Okay, I have to be honest with you. I think well spoken by Tucker. If we're to give him the most charitable interpretation, it is simply this. The reason he had Nick Fuentes on his show was simply because he believes that we should be able to hash out our ideas in public. I agree. I think free discourse is a principle that is important to the American Constitution, and without it, it's a recipe for destruction, and the right cannot afford to act exactly like the left. However, I would say that there is more at stake than just simply American principles. There are moral principles at stake that I think Ben actually gets to the heart of when he then talks with Megyn Kelly about this spat with Tucker. So here's Ben talking about that.
So now, having spoken to Tucker, I actually see that interview very differently. And I did listen to the interview, and I knew what Nick Fuentes was. And I think he did show himself to be who he is. It wasn't his most vile stuff, but you got the feel for what this guy was. But I really think Tucker was talking to him, Ben, to put like a bumper on this guy. Because what Tucker was urging him the whole time was to understand that collective punishment for any one group of people is wrong. It's deeply immoral, and it's anti-Christian, which this guy is supposed to be. And reminding him of how deeply immoral that is, that you should not be looking at a group of people, whomever it is. The left does it to everyone, whites mostly, but like this collective shame, white men in particular. And there's a group of people like Nick Fuentes that does it to groups of Jews. And he was making the case throughout the whole interview in the way that Tucker does. He's not like you or me. He's not like pointed and cross-examining.
That is not true.
And was making...
That is fundamentally untrue.
No.
Ask Senator Ted Cruz whether that is true.
He gave it to Ted Cruz because Ted Cruz is a politician.
That's hold up. So only politicians get cross-examined?
You don't. Well, look,
Truly?
It depends on the person.
Tucker would never cross-examine a person who is not a politician. That's his rule. Okay, I just have a question. We all in our industry are constantly excoriating people who are in our industry. It happens all the time, every single day.
Okay.
Again,
but we're talking about his interviews.
We can agree to disagree on your interpretation of what Tucker was doing there. I think everybody should watch and determine for themselves what they think Tucker was doing in that interview, and I urge you to watch it back to back with the Ted Cruz interview to determine whether you think that was an aggressive Tucker Carlson interview, and you can judge for yourself.
I didn't say it was aggressive. And the way, if you want to put a bumper up on Nick Fuentes, is it helpful to say you're vile, you're an anti-Semite?
Yes.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
That doesn't put a.
Yes, it
no,
is.
it isn't. That makes
Yes,
the audience feel good because you have hand-to-hand combat, but it doesn't help change that guy's view or his extremeness at all.
Okay, I'll tell you what doesn't change Nick Fuentes' view. Tucker Carlson with his arm around Nick Fuentes, grinning for the camera, while Nick Fuentes tweets out America first, and then triumphantly goes on the air the next day to explain that he has essentially used Tucker Carlson as a vehicle for manipulating other people.
Okay, I think this is really important to state at the front of this, is that Ben is not suggesting that simply because Tucker had Nick Fuentes on his show, that he was platforming him. So that's been the kind of accusation. Well, you're platforming him. How can you have this guy? I spoke on the show last week that I think this is kind of a silly accusation. I've had atheists and homosexual quote-unquote pastors and even out-of-the-closet former Christian musicians and deconstructionists and all sorts of stuff on my show. But it was never to platform them or to give them a voice. It was to cross-examine their ideas. So I think it's important to state at the very front here what Ben's argument is so that we can fully understand here. His argument is not that he should never have had Nick Fuentes on his show. I don't think that's Ben's argument. Ben's argument is that if you're going to have a guy like Nick Fuentes on your show, you don't softball the interview. This is a white nationalist who said some of the most despicable things. I mean, even on the show, he talked about Joseph Stalin, Fuentes did, and this was Tucker's response.
It's actually funny. It was December 18th. I remember because that's an important date to me. And it's Joseph Stalin's birthday.
Oh.
I'm a fan.
You're a fan of Stalin's?
Mm-hmm. Always an admirer. But we don't need to go into that. I guess.
Well, that's okay. Let's get back. We'll circle back to that.
So again, Ben is not saying that it is a problem to have Nick Fuentes on your show. He is simply saying it is a problem to have him on your show and then to not cross-examine him. When Tucker was asked by Megan about why he didn't go harder in the interview, this is what Tucker had to say.
So what do you say to those people who say, why didn't you raise any of that?
Do your own interview the way that you want to do it. You're not my editor. Buzz off. I mean, I don't know. You want to go yell at Nick Fuentes? I'll give you his cell. Call him and go sit and yell at him and feel virtuous or whatever. That's up to you.
I think that is a sophomoric, if not immature, response to the actual question here. He had an obligation, a responsibility to conduct this interview, not in the way that I see fit, but in the way that almost any rational person would see fit, to ask this dude where he gets off representing Christ, much less conservatism, while spouting white nationalist and nonsense ideas that Tucker could have brought up in this interview, which he didn't. So again, Ben brings up the fact that Tucker asks him directly about anti-Semitism, and Nick Fuentes decries it, of course, because these slippery little guys play slippery little games. And when he says that he believes anti-Semitism is bad, Tucker should have cross-examined like Ben is stating. But ultimately, I believe Ben's argument is much more fundamentally deep than simply critiquing Tucker's interview with Nick. I think we're experiencing an identity crisis. I think this is embodied by the fact that Candace Owens has one of the fastest growing, if not the biggest podcast supposedly on the conservative right. So I think we need to have a conversation about what conservatism actually is. And this is what Ben is saying. He's saying free discourse is fine, but not without standing upon principle. Because if we don't have principle, then we don't actually have a movement that we're fighting for. We just care about beating Democrats, but we don't actually care about what actually makes this country great. And this is something that I wholeheartedly agree with. We'll get back to the show in just a moment, but before we do that, I have to make sure to pay a couple of bills, but want to do so with a great friend, our friends over at sweetandsavoryclassroom.com. Now, if you're looking for an online or in-person cooking class experience, especially as Thanksgiving is upon us, you need to check these guys out. Perhaps you want to do something different. You don't just want to go the traditional route of the turkey, and you want to actually do something interesting, maybe like beef Wellington, something that's a personal favorite of mine. There's all sorts of classes that you can stream online and all sorts of upcoming classes in the month of November that will help you make the most beautiful, wonderful, delicious Thanksgiving you've ever had in your life. In order to check out everything that Sweet and Savory has to offer, go to sweetandsavoryclassroom.com, scroll through their list of options and upcoming classes, and then when you check out, use the promo code IndieThinker for a discount on your order. I honestly see where Tucker is coming from, and I see where Ben is coming from, but I think there is an idea that truly will bring these two people together. But I think there's one more person that we have to hear of. I think there's one more person we have to hear from. Let's see if Matt Walsh, when he spoke with Megyn Kelly, can provide a little bit more moral clarity as to what will truly build and sustain the conservative movement.
Look, both of those guys, Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson, they're both friends of mine, as I know they are you, Megan. And so when I get this people on both sides that are constantly screaming in my ear, and it's been this way for a long time, but in particular over the last couple of weeks, and in particular over the last 24 hours, demanding that I denounce one or the other of those guys.
Yep.
And I'm just not going to do that. It's just not ever going to happen. I mean, not ever. It's not ever going to happen. And is that because I agree with everything that either one of them say? No. I mean, we don't have to agree on everything at all. We can have disagreements. We should have disagreements. As you pointed out, Megan, we've talked about some of this stuff at the Daily Wire. I've talked about it with Ben. We've had these debates in the open. So yeah, we can have disagreements, but when it comes to disavow, condemn, denounce, that's an entirely different thing. And I'm not going to do that because I don't do that to my friends. And I mean, it really is that simple. And you can either respect that or not. I don't really care. But loyalty is a principle that is incredibly deeply important to me. And so when I hear the response, oh, but you need to stand on principle. Well, loyalty is a principle. And to me, it's, as a man, it's one of the most important principles that you can hold. As a human being, it's one of the most important principles. And so if there's someone who I know in person, Like, this is not all just on Twitter. We're not just talking heads, talking to cameras. We're also like people, and we actually have lives outside of all of this stuff. And so if there's someone who I actually know and I've sat down and had dinner with them, I've sat at their dinner table, I have their phone number, I can call them. If I have a disagreement, I can call them privately and I can tell them and we can hash it out. Someone who's supported me, someone like that. The idea that I would stand in public and condemn and denounce and disavow is just totally anathema to me. I cannot do it. I won't ever do it.
I totally agree with Matt in this regard. I think loyalty is a value and it's an important one, but my question is loyalty to who and loyalty to what? For instance, Candace Owens doesn't seem to be very loyal to her supposed friend Charlie Kirk. She's willing to piss all over his grave and suggest that the guy that actually killed him didn't kill him, and that the people who are closest to him and the people that love him are actually responsible and somehow in cahoots with the death of Charlie Kirk.
When you say you believe that Charlie Kirk was betrayed by someone close to him, what do you mean?
I think that in the coming weeks, there's going to be a lot of financial reports that are coming out. And I, first and foremost, do not believe that Tyler Robinson killed Charlie Kirk. I want to be very clear on that.
So I don't see that there's any loyalty to Candace, because Candace doesn't have a loyalty to truth or to reason. She has a loyalty to building a big platform for herself, and she doesn't care about who gets in her way in the process, including the truth. So while I agree with Matt, and I would say that loyalty is an important value and one that we should hold near and dear to us as conservatives, because we don't want to be vile, backstabbing losers like Judas.
Shalom, Judas.
So while we should be loyal to friends, we should be loyal to one thing above all else. We should be loyal to Christ and to his word. And if we're going to hold the conservative movement together in any way for the foreseeable future, we have to do it with that at the forefront. We have to be willing to put Christian principles and Christian truth ahead of all else. Let me put it this way. I'll try to be vague on details here because I love this person and care about them, and I am not saying this to speak about them in particular, but just to give you an illustration of how this works. So I have had a sponsor in the past on my show, and this is somebody that I love and somebody that has been very helpful to me, frankly, in help starting my show. And they have a certain business, and I needed that business's service. And when it came time to do it, his business was far too expensive for me and my family to use, but we needed to use somebody, and another business allowed us to be able to do it way cheaply in such a way that I couldn't use my friend at all. And there's nothing that he could really do about that. And there's nothing I could do about that. But this other business was capable of doing something that would allow me to be able to do something that would be a great blessing for my family. Now, I laid this all out for my friend, and I said, listen, I don't have any other choice. I can't use you guys, and you know that. And it just leaves me with the opportunity to do this. So it's either not help you and not help my family, or not help you but be able to help my family. And I laid that out for him, and I said, I got to choose this business. I don't have any other choice. And he said he understood that, and he was very compassionate about the decision we were in and said, hey, you need to take care of your family. But of course, he didn't quite mean that, because later he took me into his office and told me how upset he was that I chose this other business rather than him when I couldn't have used him in the first place. So of course he got his feelings hurt and got all bitter because I didn't use him. Now, I still love this guy to this day. If I saw him in public, I would shake his hand, give him a hug, and all of that. But there is a sense of loyalty that I had to this guy, but it doesn't trump my sense of loyalty that I have to my family. And the reason for that is that I'm a Christian. And my family will always come first before business. And I will always try to make sure that my family is taken care of before I ever allow business relationships to interfere and do something negative to my family. Again, I do that because Christ is first and foremost in my life. And if the world is against Christ, I am against the world. Because I put Christ first, I say my family is a priority to me above my business relationships. The point I'm trying to make here is that when we truly have loyalties in accordance with moral principles, that's when we can truly understand how our loyalty is to be ordered. I don't believe in the principle, no enemies to the right, because I believe in a bigger, more important principles. What I'm angling at is just simply this. If we're not creating a movement where the ideas of Nick Fuentes are not only idiotic but abhorrent, then I don't want anything to do with it. This is why I hate the left. They are anti-Christ. A vote for them is a vote for Satan. They talk a lot about compassion and care for the poor, but they don't. They just as quick murder your baby as opposed to give you SNAP benefits so that you could feed it. And this is where morally blind people will say, you're engaging in cancel culture. If I am, I hope it's the kind of cancel culture endorsed in Ephesians 5:11, which says that we have nothing to do with the deceitful deeds of darkness, but rather we expose them. All I'm asking for is this, is that we Christians commit to defending God's word as the ultimate authority for our society. And if we can't do that, what are we doing? How about this? If you question my mission based upon the fact that I lean a little bit more on Ben's side, and you want to criticize me for the fact that I'm basically siding with a Jew while also declaring that we need to found the conservative movement upon the word of God, then I would just tell you, let that serve as a warning to you. Let that serve as a reminder that the people who are actually fighting for Christian values more so in our society today than pastors are people like Ben, who is a Jew. If nothing else, we should take that as a reproof against our movement and double down, not back away. So I don't care how many times Nick says he's a Catholic, in other words. What I care about is the people who are standing for biblical values. Nick isn't a biblical Catholic if he is one in the first place. So no matter how many times Tucker says he's just asking questions to people like Nick Fuentes, all I can tell you is that all men have to stand before God and give an account for every idle word and every idle question spoken. And if we agree with that, that ultimately that our words have to coincide with God's words, then I just want to ask you this. Where do you think the future of the conservative movement is if it isn't found in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 7, where Jesus says this, if you build your house upon my words, it will have a solid foundation on a rock. But if you build it upon anything else, it will only be built upon sinking sand. And yeah, it may stand for a while, but it will eventually erode until it is finally destroyed. My point to you is this. If we can agree that our movement might need to be built upon a solid foundation, we can find no other better than the Word of God, and we must judge all conservatives based upon that and that alone. And if we can build a movement based upon that, we have a future not only for our country, but for our kids. All right, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget, in the month of December, we have a brand new freebie coming out, the documentary Free Burma Rangers. It's a powerful story about a missionary who takes up arms to go and fight for those less fortunate who are caught in the crosshairs of war zones all around the world. You don't want to miss it, so make sure to go over to the YouTube channel and subscribe there, but most importantly, become a member over at indiethinker.org/support, where you can gain access to ebooks, audiobooks, movies, documentaries, and so much more that will help you take your Christian thinking journey to the next level. Don't forget to check out the sponsors down below in the description of this podcast, but most importantly, go with God.